I ask you to put your hands together as I introduce Lord Robertson.
Mr. President, Mr. Global President as well, thank you very much for that kind introduction. There's not many people get to hear their obituary before they die. And I can do that. You know, when Russell phoned me, he said, we're having a Burns supper. He said, are you free? And I said, yes. And he said, that's good, because that's the price range we were thinking about. I have to say, living in Scotland as I do, came out of NATO, and I was in this bar in Glasgow, hotel bar in Glasgow, and a very large, very drunk individual wandered over to me, wagged his finger and said, do you know you're the spitting image of that bastard Robertson? I said, yes, it's a bloody nightmare. So, it's a great delight to be here. This is my 5th Burns supper, has to be said, this season. They're only the 2nd that I've spoken at. But 2 years ago, I did the Immortal memory at the Scotland Yard Burns supper in London, and it was a fair success. And at the end, they all stood up and sang, "Will you no come back again?" And this year, I went back and did the Immortal memory again, and this time they sang, "Will you definitely no come back again?" But I'm here this evening in my hometown of Dunblane, and I thank you for the invitation and for your hospitality this evening. We're here tonight to commemorate a man whose very brief life was so colourful, so eventful, and so bountifully productive that 2.5 centuries on, we're still mesmerised by his words, his music, and the enduring spirit of his message. And yet, is that not really quite mysterious? Why is it that this man alone, among all the great men and women of letters of British history, has admirers sitting down every year to celebrate his life and works? Why is there no annual remembrance of Chaucer, of Shakespeare, Byron, of Tennyson? Why is it that over this and the next few weeks, all over Scotland and an ever-increasing length of countries throughout the world, supper gatherings just like this one will read his poems, sing his songs, marvel at his words, and leave at the end of the evening with their lives enriched for it? 10 million people across the world will be doing what you're doing this evening as well. And they will be caught by the magic, not of some celebrity and of note, but by the prodigious talent of a simple, long-dead ploughman from the west of Scotland. And unbelievably again, Robert Burns has become part of the world's common language. When millions of people say, quite oblivious often in most cases to their origins, to see ourselves as others see us, or the best laid schemes of mice and men, you know, that in itself is pretty remarkable. That when right across the globe, with the passing of every old year, even the passing of the millennium itself, it's sung into history by renditions of Auld Lang Syne, a really, really special international song as well. Of course, there are the cynics in the world who say, well, it's just a post-New Year excuse for drinking. And if it ever was the explanation for the Robert Burns phenomenon, then that flame would assuredly have died out long ago, consumed by passing fads and fashions as generations have come and gone, just like the snow off Scottish dykes. Robert Burns, with only 37 years to live a life, and what a life it was, had to rely on his own genius to make his own history. And it's in tribute to all that he did and wrote and collected as well as in the remarkable richness and complexity of how he lived it, that here tonight in Dunblane and down through the generations and the centuries, from father to son, from mother to daughter, across this land and beyond the oceans, we can still look at Burns' life as if it were just yesterday. You can look and listen to Burns' poems as if he was writing about today, feel the passions as if it was ours in 2024 and not 1779. Know his music as if it was written for a podcast or for a tweet. Sir Robert Burns is still with us today. His life and love's long gone, but a golden legacy left for us to treasure, to admire, and still to revere. And is that not, I put it to you, not the real reason for Robert Burns' enduring and perpetuating popularity? He was quite simply a genius with words and with music. He listened acutely to the talk and the banter in the streets and in the fields. He watched and he witnessed and lived with the tunes and the words that he heard, and then he distilled that heady cocktail into the mighty works that we read and still relish today. He could spot with an unerring skill and a unique perception the warmth and the humanity of the common man and woman, and then speak to us of their tenacity and dignity, their intensity, their troubles, their hardships, but also of their character, their humour, and their overwhelming quality. Thomas Carlyle, the famous, the towering genius who wrote the history of the French Revolution, at that time called him the largest soul in Britain's lands. So Robert Burns, for us, exposes the rawness of human emotion, from love to satire, from body sex to tender humility, from wild and coruscating anger to the very subtlest of mockery. And we, without his talent for fluency and elucidation, can only stand in awe at how he knows and actually understands us as well. J.M. Barrie, that famous Scotsman, the author of Peter Pan, he said, "One half of Burns we can all fathom, so Scotch that he was and is our blood relation, and the one who lived more vividly than the rest." And I think Barrie here begins to solve that great mystery of why we are still here doing Burns and not the other great literary geniuses. He had a huge talent, a near magical mastery of words and themes and sentiments. He had a hypnotic effect on people, and especially on women, which took him into many a bed and fathered so many children, 12 children to 4 women that we know about. Probably accounts for half the Scottish population today, if you work it out. He enjoyed fortune and fame, disaster and penury. He loved and lost and lost and loved. He was totally reckless in life and loves, and yet he died a legend. And his recklessness, a sure guarantee today of public humiliation, was not simply confined to his love life. In his politics and in his attitude to the sanctimoniousness of the church, he was equally bold and risk-taking. If you take Holy Willie's prayer, a wonderful attack on the hypocrisy of the time. One of his biographers said of that poem, the poem was scurrilous, brutal, indecent, and profane. And it's really not too difficult to imagine the reaction from those who he called the unco good. And that's not to mention the merry muses of Caledonia, the slim volume of bawdy poems and songs, which even today, when their authorship is beyond doubt, are rarely spoken about, lest the prim and proper be offended, and what effect they must have had 2.5 centuries ago when nobody had even thought of the words Pornhub before. Yet he was reckless. Yes, he was reckless. Assuredly, he had his faults, but at the same time, he had that combination of towering genius and a common touch, which makes him still so relevant and so loved today. And Burns, the man, had a fair appetite for politics as well. Centuries on, it's difficult to pin down his brand of politics, whether he was nationalist or unionist, so he's claimed by everybody. But the fact is that he believed with real conviction in freedom. Freedom from want and poverty and from degradation. And freedom to live the life that you want, the freedom that we have today and all too often take for granted. He commanded attention then, as he still does today, and his messages are powerful and influential and used long after the land that he lived in has changed out of all recognition. Small wonder that Thomas Carlyle, again that great writer, was to say with such foresight. He said, "You would find it strange if I call Burns the most gifted British soul we had in that century of ours, and yet I believe the day is coming when there will be little danger of saying so." And how he got it right, how Thomas Carlyle got it right. And maybe he too had read the truly magnificent Cotter's Saturday Night, with that wonderful, wonderful, memorable peroration. From scenes like this, old Scotia's grandeur springs, that makes her loved at home, revered abroad. Princes and lords are but the breath of kings, and honest man's the noblest work of God. So fellow celebrants, this evening with these stirring words I say to you, on this night at the 265th anniversary of the poet's birth in humble Alloway, let us now recognise one of our nation's greatest sons, an international icon and Scotland's national bard, a man at the molten core of the Scottish character. Please be upstanding. The toast is the immortal memory of Robert Burns.